Homage to Barcelona by Colm Tóibín. Read by Stanley Townsend. Chapter 1. Demons and Dragons. I remember the strange humidity during that first September in the city. I remember the rancid smells and the constant noise as steel shutters were pulled up and down. I remember the sound of cars and motorbikes reverberating against the old stone buildings, the footfalls and voices which echoed in the narrow streets. It was 1975, 2 months before the death of General Franco. I was 20 years old, and I had just arrived in Barcelona. The buildings on the Rambla, the long tree-lined walk between the Plaça de Catalunya and the port, were as different as each face which sized you up for a split second before it passed. The Rambla, busy all the time, was a whole new world to wander in and discover. The kiosks selling newspapers and books were open day and night. During the day, one stretch had kiosks selling flowers, another had kiosks with animals for sale. People sat at the outside tables for hours on end, staring at passers-by. I knew no Spanish, but I understood that the Rambla had its own customs, its own rules. The prostitutes, for example, didn't seem to come up from the port beyond a certain point. Also, nobody seemed to be going anywhere in particular. Most people seemed to be idly strolling. On Sunday mornings, families filled the Rambla, walking up and down under the shade of the plane trees. I tried out each bar. I stood at the kiosks and tried to decipher the newspaper headlines and the titles of books. One night, while close to the cathedral, I strayed into a small square through a narrow alleyway. It was quiet and dark, hidden away. One of the walls had been badly damaged by shrapnel or bullets. Nobody came through the alleyway while I was there, and there was no sound except the trickle of water from a small fountain in the middle of the square. I began to haunt the old city. I could hardly wait for darkness to fall when the lamps would be lit high up on the walls and the streets would become shadowy, ghostly. This was the late medieval world of master craftsmen, stonecutters, masons, sculptors and architects surviving intact in the middle of a city. When I found work as a teacher and decided to stay for a while, I began to study the language, and by January I was confident that I had made some progress. One evening I was invited for supper to a small flat in the Gothic quarter. My fellow guests were natives of the city. As the conversation went on, I realized that I couldn't understand a single word they said. All the nights spent poring over the niceties and oddities of Spanish grammar had been in vain. It was only when someone apologized to me for speaking in Catalan, and thus excluding me, that I understood the problem. They and their family and friends, they explained, all spoke Catalan as a first language, although they were fluent in Spanish as well. Most of them couldn't write the language, however, and few of them had ever read a book in Catalan. It wasn't merely spoken, they explained, in villages and remote places. It was the language of the prosperous classes in Barcelona. Franco had banned the public use of the language in 1939. Catalan, I discovered, isn't a dialect of Spanish, nor of Provençal, although it has close connections with both. Some words, casa for house, for example, are the same as in Spanish. Other words, menjar for eat, are close to French or Italian. Most of the words for fruit, vegetables, and spices are completely different from the Spanish words. The way of forming the past simple is like no other language. The way of forming the past continuous is more or less the same as Spanish. The way of forming the past subjunctive is the same as in Italian. Catalan is a pure Latin language. There are no Arabic sounds. Thus the pronunciation of the word Barcelona does not have the th sound as used in the series Fawlty Towers. Catalan sounds are harsh and guttural. The language is full of short, sharp nouns such as cap for head, fil for sun, clau for key, and similar sounding verbs. Creg for I believe, vaig for I go, and vul for I want. By the time I began to learn Catalan in 1976, I didn't just need it in order to follow the conversation at dinner parties. I needed it to know what the crowd was shouting in the streets, to read the writing on the walls. In that year, the language which had been the preserve of the city's middle classes and which had
Sample complete. Ready to continue?